We're back in the Element Well studio. We welcome now Ray Higgins, Executive Director of the Mississippi Public Employees Retirement System, and also Bill Benson, Lee County Chancery Clerk and a member of the PERS Board. Ray, Bill, thanks for coming in today. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great to be here. I always enjoy listening to the show.
Thank you.
That's
Appreciate
great.
that. So,
and before we start, I would like to thank
Yeah.
you for your coverage of this topic.
Okay.
I've listened to most of your segments. You've got the information. You understand the problem. You have outlined it almost as well as anybody could, and I appreciate that. That's not always the case.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback, and that's what, honestly, that makes me feel good, because that's what I've tried to do, is just keep the conversation going and make sure that folks understand the problem and the facts surrounding this issue, and hopefully devise some amenable and workable solutions. I feel like that's where we are. But obviously what has kind of ignited the firestorm, I think is fair to say, is the House, the Mississippi House, has passed a measure and has proposed to restructure the board that has been transmitted to the Senate. That will be taken up by a Senate committee responsible for voting either up or down on that, and then see where it goes from there. Let's start, Ray, if we could, just explain the size of PERS, because I've seen lots of data out there about the number, and I've got the official PERS data in front of me, but I've seen the numbers coming from different sources, and they don't always agree. So in terms of active members and then retired members, you got inactive members as well.
Sure, certainly. Well, on that note, it's important to remember how important PERS is, not only to our membership, but also the entire state of Mississippi. Very important in terms of people as well as dollars. As far as the people that you referenced, over 300,000 in total membership. We have around 115,000 retirees, around 145,000 active members. Of course, the difference is made up of inactive members, but very important. Again, that's about 10% of the state's population. The overall portfolio as of this morning is approximately $33 billion as far as assets under management. But it's also important to realize the economic impact of PERS, because we pay out over $3 billion in benefit payments annually to every county in the state of Mississippi. Over 90% stays in the state of Mississippi, and that's generating a huge economic impact. So again, not only important in terms of people, but also in terms of dollars and economic output.
And let's also just kind of level set here that even though this topic is being discussed and various proposals are being considered, the program's not in any immediate danger of not being able to meet its benefit payment obligations.
No, PERS is certainly stable. We just have to work together to keep it that way, and we all want to be part of the solution. So PERS is very stable. This is more of a long-term conversation, much like in your previous article. Long-term, either revenue has to go up or the cost and expenses have to go down, or a combination of both. So PERS is certainly stable, but long-term, we need additional funding.
Yeah, and in fact, last year we produced a net increase in the fund based on revenues coming in and benefit payments, expenses going out, administrative costs. We had a net increase.
That is correct, and last year's investment return was around 7.76%, and that was above the median compared to other public pension plans, and we had a positive year.
Yeah, so let's talk about the problem that needs to be addressed. You hear the concept and the term unfunded liability kicked around. I think there are three major metrics that are used to gauge the financial health of a defined benefit plan. And those are really measurements that are typically calculated by actuaries that examine all the factors, and it's a projection exercise as much as it is anything.
True. Great question. As far as the unfunded liability, that is the difference from an actuarial standpoint between what you have and what you need, as far as your actuarial assets and actuarial liabilities. Again, the difference between what you have and what you need. You've probably heard that we're around 60% funded. The last actuarial valuation has that at 56%. The year before that was around 61%. But we've remained at a roughly 60% funded ratio for well over a decade. And that funded ratio is one metric that captures the actuarial assets and liabilities. It's the other 40%, if you will, that represents the unfunded liability. And As of the last report, that's around $25 billion at this time. But what we should explain is some of the background and how we got there. It's been building for decades. Really, PERS financially, we are an accumulation of everything that's happened since we were created roughly 70 years ago. But speaking to the last quarter century or the last 25 years, there are several things that have led to the growth in that unfunded liability. One being in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were some additional benefits placed into law without additional funding at the time. In the 2 decades that followed, we had a declining active to retiree ratio, meaning fewer actives paying into the system, more retirees coming onto the system, and retirees living longer. And that's a good thing, but it has a cost.
Right.
We had several economic downturns, including the Great Recession. You know, you had the dot-com bubble, you had the Great Recession, a little downturn there with the pandemic, but certainly the global financial crisis in the middle there. And then lastly, I'll just say over the last 20 years, there's been a more conservative approach to public pensions as far as better assumptions, which are sometimes lower assumptions. And those are not bad things, but they have a cost. So that's not an all-inclusive list, but if you put it on one hand, what led to the growth in the unfunded, that's the background, and it's taken decades to get here, and it'll take some time to work out of it.
So you said we were, I believe, 56% is
Yes.
our funded ratio right now.
That's
So
correct.
what's the standard? What do the actuaries believe? And in the industry, there's a standard, right, that is the goal.
Well, there may not necessarily be an official standard for funded ratio,
Okay.
but there are certainly standards of practice, actuarial standards of practice
Yeah.
that our actuaries and auditors use in compiling these reports. And we have an actuarial audit performed every 5 years specifically on our actuary. So there are standards in that regard. As far as funded ratio, you often hear talk about the 80% funded status.
Yeah.
That's not an official regulatory standard or anything. But that's the one you've probably heard of. But the key is you've got to take in different metrics, because not only the valuation is a snapshot in time today, but you also want to look at trends going forward long term and the projections to see that the fund's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and so of course that would include the lifespan of the retiree population, and then the number of people working, paying into the program, and their pay as well. There's some projections about what you think salaries would be, because the contributions that employee and employers pay based on that.
Absolutely. There are numerous assumptions that factor in. PERS is a very complex issue with a lot of moving parts. It's hard to discuss it in a vacuum, a lot of moving parts.
So, Bill, your thoughts about this HB 1590, the legislation in the House that has been transmitted to the Senate, will be taken up, as we said earlier, by the appropriate Senate committee today at 1:30. Best I can tell, the members of PERS are not real crazy about this, not fond of this.
That's correct. The members aren't, nor is the PERS board, as we have stated. This, to me, is kind of a we don't like the message, so let's shoot the messenger type thing. As you so aptly stated yesterday, it's benefits versus cost. And every member that I've heard speak to this issue says, we want to reassure the retirees and the current employees we're not doing anything to their benefits. Well, if we're not doing anything to their benefits, then the revenue side has to be addressed. The only lever that the board has to address that is the employer contribution. And I do the budget for Lee County, so I know, yes, it's a problem for cities and counties. However, as a fiduciary for the board, and as I walked in and took that sworn oath, and every other member did, I've served since 2008 and have served with some very, very good members of this board who have carried out what they considered to be their fiduciary duty, including the Governor Reeves, who even at times it might not philosophically fit what he believed, and it might not have been the best thing politically for him, but he voted to do what he thought was best for the fund, as have every other member that I have served with. And in order to do that, to preserve the fund for long term, at this point, our only option is to pull the lever that we have. I do believe that there's some of the things that are being said as far as, well, we should get rid of the board because the returns haven't been good enough. Well, as you stated yesterday, our returns have been well above what other PERS funds.
The ROI is in line.
It is in line and in better than most. There has been criticism of expense for those returns.
Hold that thought. We're taking a break.
Sure.
We'll come back. Stay with us, folks. We're in the Element Wealth studio. We're visiting with Ray Higgins, Executive Director of the Mississippi Public Employees Retirement System, and also Bill Benson, Lee County Chancery Clerk, and a member of the PERS Board. So we were just talking offline, something I wanted you to go through, Bill, if you will, that there's a lot of folks who feel like, well, gee, we could achieve better investment returns, and that's kind of a shortfall of the board, and maybe it's the third party the board has contracted with to manage what's it up to now, $34 billion, I think, when I looked at the balance sheet in the last financial report, somewhere in that. It's north of $30 billion.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. And so explain for our audience the process of selecting who you contract with to actually manage and allocate the assets, essentially the investment manager.
Sure. And before I finish that, before I get to that, to finish the statement that we were making before we left, there's been a lot of discussion about the cost of those investment managers.
Yes.
And at the $100 million a year, yes, that is a lot of money. But that is 31 cents per $100.
Yeah, it's 0.3%.
In order to return an investment that it is above the industry standard for pension plans.
Yep.
As you stated offline, what do we get if we go cheaper? And it's hard to get cheaper than 31 cents.
Yeah, that's in line. I mean, that's in line. And you guys know this. The pool of organizations, firms that are even qualified to manage a portfolio this size, especially in a defined state benefit plan, there are not that many of them out there anymore.
That's right. And in fact, Mercer was the first investment group who helped when I first came to the board.
Okay.
And then they got completely out of governmental pensions.
Okay.
And the board hired Callan, which is a large, I don't know if it's the largest, but a very large firm who does investment management and investment consulting for a lot of pension plans around the country. And that's who we associate as Callan.
Okay.
In the process that you asked about as to how is the board involved in selecting that, Callan typically comes to us almost on an annual basis with an allocation assumption.
That's right.
And usually 3 or 4 allocation assumptions seeing how much risk do you want to take. With this risk, you have the potential to make X, or you have the potential to lose X. And it walks through from the most aggressive to the least aggressive to somewhere in the middle. And usually somewhere in the middle is typically where we need to be in order to try to get the investment rate of return that has been projected.
Yeah.
That is discussed in the investment committee. The board is fully engaged with that, but it is based on the advice of the experts that are there and staff.
Okay.
But we do walk through all of that.
Okay.
When it comes time then to select an investment manager who's actually going to be a small cap fund participant or a real estate, again, Callan staff go through the myriad of people who are eligible to do that for a fund our size.
Yeah.
Typically will bring 3 candidates to the board, all of whom, if you look at their resume, quality folks.
Yeah.
They present to the board, to the investment committee. Again, investment committee is involved. They present, questions are asked, staff asks questions, staff makes recommendations, Callan makes recommendations, and board chooses. If during this course of time, just as anything else, a manager doesn't perform, we are informed at every meeting. This manager has not been performing. Sometimes that's just because the type of investment they have is out of favor for this economic time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it may be there have been changes in that firm and the people we hired aren't there anymore.
Okay.
And so they're put on a watch list. And if that continues, those people are fired, maybe the wrong term, but those people are removed from the fund, and we have a new manager search for that segment of the investment portion of our allocation. Staff is involved, Callan involved, the board is involved.
Okay.
Now we're not, as you said, we're not going to say, hey, you need to buy 100 shares of Amazon today. We're not. That's not the board's function.
Right.
We are higher level, looking at their recommendations, but we're not stock picking.
Okay, so yeah, and I just wanted you to clarify that, and I appreciate that, Bill. And so you also indicated offline that they present. You tell them we want an allocation that's basically moderate risk, and they come back with an asset allocation model. Present that to the board, which essentially just says, okay, of the total amount of assets we have, $30 billion, whatever, X percent into this asset class, X percent. That's usually what those look like, those allocation models look like. And then the board accepts, signs off on that. I mean, it's all done as a formality, right? I assume a motion is made, it's agreed to.
That's right.
You send that back to them, and they go invest thusly.
Right. Once the firm is picked, once that
you select the firm. The firm says, and you work with them, and you say we want a moderate risk profile for our investment portfolio for our assets, and they come back and say, okay, here's how we recommend you allocate across the categories, and then the board accepts that.
And then those managers again come to the board and present to them semi-annually.
Okay.
It used to be annually until the fund has grown so much. It's hard. You can't get them all in that time frame. But they all come back, present semi-annually. What's your projection? They tell us what our projection is for the upcoming 6 months, year, 5 years. They will report on how their fund is doing. Staff does that regularly, but the actual manager will come to the board meeting.
Okay.
Semi-annually.
And of course, there's an income component to the investment, and there's a growth component as well.
Right.
You need income because you got to have cash in addition to the contributions to meet the expense requirements.
That's right.
Absolutely, and I'll just add to the as far as the selection process, it's a very comprehensive process using quantitative and qualitative factors, but also to the asset allocation. We do, with the investment consultants and staff, an asset liability study every 3 to 5 years, and that helps guide those liability needs. Helps guide the asset allocation that the board approves. Okay, so Ray, the PERS has issued official statement on its position on HB 1590, which would reconstitute the board. Presently, the board consists of 8 members, which includes 10 members, which includes 8 which are elected by the PERS membership, both retired and active. And then you've also got the state treasurer and the commissioner of the Department of Revenue. The new Constitution would be 11 members, as proposed by HB 1590. It would be restructured across 11 members, 1 elected member from PERS active members, 1 from PERS retired members. The Commissioner of Revenue, the State Treasurer would remain on. The other 7 would be appointed, 4 by the Governor, 3 by the Lieutenant Governor. I read the PERS official statement. You outlined a number of concerns there. Tell the audience, what is the main concern, and what are the overarching concerns among the PERS membership and the board with this restructuring plan?
You may want me to take that question,
if
that's
sure.
all right.
I don't
want to put the direct. This was a board statement.
Okay.
And the board issued the statement opposing this. One, you disenfranchised 300,000 participants who are out there. Again, some of the reason. Again, in my opinion, we're shooting the messenger versus accepting the message. But the information that is being used to say, again, just as we've talked about, one of the reasons that we need to replace the board's investment returns. You and I both know they're on par. The cost of those investments are on par. And I want to answer one of the other questions. Well, why did they lower the assessment rate, the projected rate of return?
The target rate.
The target rate.
Yep.
Why did they do that?
Yep.
And that was asked this morning, and I'll tell you why I voted to do that.
Okay.
One is that since the last 2 actuarial audits have recommended 7%.
It was 7.5?
It was 7.55.
5.5. Okay.
It was, and when I first came to the board, it was 8.
That's what I remember.
We were able to lower it to 7.
When was that, Bill? When you came to the board?
I came to the board in 2008.
Okay.
I'm the longest serving active member right now.
Gotcha.
2008, it was 8%. Lowered it to 7.75, I believe, about 2017.
I think
16, 17, somewhere right in there, and set up a plan to work our way down. The 32% year allowed us to get it to the 7.55. We weren't making much inroads in getting it to the 7. We have 2 actuarial audits that tell us to do that.
Okay.
Then the peer committee, which is an arm of the legislature, writes that, hey, PERS board, you aren't getting to 7% as the actuaries have recommended. State Auditor's Office, again, an arm of the state, says PERS board, you need to get to 7%. One of the things I've heard, well, the PERS board's not listening to their advisors. Well, yes, we are. We listen to them. We went to the 7%, understanding that, yes, that creates more unfunded liability, but it does give a more accurate picture of what our advisors are telling us that the future
it's achievable
is going to hold, and hopefully any gains that I hope they're wrong.
Let's continue after the break. Right. Sorry to interrupt you. We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio. We're talking about PERS. All right. So, Bill, clearly you made it clear that the board itself is the body which issued the official statement opposing HB 1590. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit here on the part of the legislature. They're sitting there saying, look, this thing has obviously got problems. PERS has problems. Something's got to be done. And what I hear over and over again from them is this board has not acted. They have not provided any viable solutions to address the financial headwinds the fund is facing. Now, I know the board has suggested an increase in the employer contribution rate, and I think that was scheduled to go into effect July 1, and I believe there were two other dates, right, that it was scheduled to go into effect that got delayed, essentially postponed, suspended, and now this bill would suspend it again. Of course, this is not popular amongst the municipalities and the school districts and the counties, which don't have the luxury of having a general fund cover that additional employer contribution. They've been down at the legislature saying, you can't put this on us. If you do, you're going to have to fund us. You're going to have to send us more money somehow down to the municipal, to the local level to cover this additional expense. But from their perspective, they're saying we just haven't got a viable plan. Is it that? Or can you say that, no, the board has submitted a plan and have offered proposals? You, legislature, haven't acted on it. And let's be clear, only the legislature, because I actually spoke. Your people are great, by the way. Your communications director, Shelley, was great. And every question I ask, she gets answers. And often she goes to your attorney and says, here, Joyce, what the attorney said. So it's my understanding that only the legislature, this is in code, they're the only ones that can change the benefit structure. They're the only ones that can change the contribution percentages. Is that right?
No, that part's not right.
Okay.
The board still has the lever to...
On both? Employer and employee?
Just on employer.
That's what I thought.
Employee, the Attorney General's opinion on employee contributions is that there must be a corresponding
commensurate increase in the benefits.
Which just defeats the whole purpose.
Which I said in the article, as you know. So because I got that from the AG.
Plus, the cost of the current benefit to the new hire is the total cost is 12%. The new hire is putting 9% of that in. Yep. So the employer is only paying 3% of the cost of the new hire.
What do you mean? What, they're not contributing the 17.4%?
That's going to pay down the debt. That's going to pay those unfunded benefits.
Oh, but they're still contributing 17.4%. You're talking about where the money goes.
I'm just talking about where the money goes.
Okay.
If you raise the employee contribution to 10, then they're paying 10 of their 12%.
I got you.
And so,
but you'd have to increase benefits, so I don't see how we're making any progress.
I don't see how you make any.
But that could be changed with law. That's in code, I believe. If it's the AG's opinion, I think that's based on statute, if I'm not mistaken. So if the legislature said, hey, if they passed a law, amended that, said, well, we could increase the employee contribution rate without increasing benefits on a corresponding basis, and then that could be done. I'm not suggesting that, but I'm saying I think it would require an amendment in law.
I'm an accountant, not an attorney on that, so I don't want to go there with that, but that's certainly a possibility with that. One of the things I think there has been some dissatisfaction is that the board has not presented. We did present a Tier 5 to them this year. That Tier 5 is basically the benefits of Tier 4 without a guaranteed COLA.
Okay.
And that's the big cost in the room.
Yep.
And you can kind of blame that directly on me because there were some other plans out there. And my opinion was let's cut all this other stuff out and get to the heart of what really makes a difference.
So there's been a proposal to freeze that. I know you're familiar with that.
Right.
Can the board do that?
No. The board cannot freeze.
I didn't think so.
The board cannot do anything to change benefits.
Only the legislature.
Only the legislature can change benefits.
And that would require law.
That would require law. And to go along with it, has the board made other proposals? No, the board has not proposed to the legislature to freeze the COLA. Now, we have sent we've been asked multiple times, what does freezing the COLA for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what does that do? And staff has prepared that for them and sent multiple variations of what happens if they do that. But again, if you're having the legislature saying, no, retirees, we're not going to impact your current benefits, at that point we need to be looking somewhere else if that's the case. But we have presented to them. Now, the other question has come up, well, why have you not told us, let's just get out of this thing. Let's pay off everybody and let's go to a defined contribution plan. The cost of a complete defined contribution plan is an additional $10 billion.
I thought it was 12, but 10 will work.
Over 30 years. So that's not a proposal to come to them with.
Yeah.
If you do a hybrid, that's different amounts over different times, but over 10 years, it puts more pressure.
Yeah.
Now, and what we're trying to do is relieve pressure. So adding more pressure doesn't work. So we come back to your conundrum of, hey, it is benefits or it's revenue.
I mean, it truly is.
And that's where the board has come from, which with the only lever that the board has to present.
I got you.
Now, I will say that there's been a lot of discussion. This has just been dropped in our lap. How did we get here?
Hang on. We'll come back. We're taking a break right here. It's top of the hour. That means Fox News, SuperTalk News. We've got the PERS folks in the LMOL studio. We're coming right back. So we're visiting with Ray Higgins, the Executive Director of the Public Employees Retirement System, and also Bill Benson, Lee County Chancery Clerk, PERS Board member. So I was just telling you that I've seen out in the social media universe and talking to legislators who have all had their phones blowing up, as you guys know, since this bill was passed and even considered. I mean, that started it. Response from the PERS member expressing their concerns and essentially warning these legislators, if you vote for this thing, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we get you voted out next time. And they are a significant size of voters, with over 300,000 when you count all the plans together. So certainly that could make a difference in an election. But it feels like, Bill, their fears are a bit overblown, that if we were to make these adjustments and restructure the board, that the first thing the board would do is come in and take a hacksaw to all the benefit programs, including the so-called 13 check, the cost of living adjustment. But as we have just discussed, that's not really the purview or within the power of the board. So why do you think they're so concerned about that?
I think there's concern and fear of the unknown.
Okay.
Right now, they elect their membership. The membership elects the board. They know the board is there and will perform their fiduciary duty as they're sworn to do, to protect the plan participants as the plan is prescribed by the legislature. If that prescription changes, then my role as a board member changes with it to protect the fund as is prescribed.
Okay.
So I think there's fear of that. Not necessarily fear that that board can't change anything unless the legislature gives them the lever to do something like that. At this point, no, they cannot.
Can't. Right.
And now they can make recommendations to change. They can. I can't. I don't know what a new board that walks in would do. I know what they should do, which is what we discussed. They should be sworn to an oath of fiduciary loyalty to the plan participants as the fund is prescribed, as the plan is prescribed by the legislature. But and particularly what even drives the fear more is the way that this bill was handled. The way that it came from, there was no discussion on the House side. Came from a bill where the statute was open to that area of the code, and there was an amendment by the chairman on the floor. There was very little discussion from there, and it was passed. There was no discussion, and as one of the responses you gave, a change this drastic needs a lot more discussion than what happened on the House floor to get to the Senate and to be done in a week's time or a 2 weeks' time without a lot of input going into it from the various participating groups. So I think you're having that. I've had a lot of calls, as I told you earlier.
Yeah.
I think you see about 25% of the plan participants are either eligible or will be eligible in 5 years to retire. And again, it may not be accurate, but just as some of the statements that have been made about the PERS board are not accurate. The investment returns, this type of thing, the expenses done, that we have not followed the advice of our advisors, which we have. Those are inaccurate also. I don't dispute that some of the other side of that are inaccurate, but that's what the public hears and what participants hear, and I'm afraid you'll have a rush to June 30 that, hey, I need to get mine while I can. They're going to do away with this or that or whatever. I need to get there, and that puts even more pressure.
Yeah, that would exacerbate the financial problems the plan is holding. But it's also true that the supplemental legislative plan is not causing the problems for PERS, as many PERS members have indicated. I've seen that, and that's not true.
That is an inaccurate statement. The supplemental plan is a drop in the bucket,
right? And
it's pretty well funded.
Yeah, it is. Well, somebody actually asked me, why didn't you write an article on that? Well, there's nothing to write about.
No, it's pretty well funded. You can take the whole every dime in that plan, drop it into PERS, and it doesn't even make a little bitty splash.
Right.
It's less than a raindrop hitting it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
Well, also the actuary recommended increasing the employer contribution for that plan as well. It's just a smaller amount.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
Right. That's right. It went up 1%, I believe.
1%.
7 and change, I think, is what it is. Are they recommending going up a percent on that?
1% to 8.4, I believe.
Yeah, it's 7.4 now is the employer side. I think the employee's 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I do want to go back to the fact, well, this just was dropped in our lap. This has been going on since 2011. I was, unfortunately, drew the short straw, and I was the chairman of the board in 2011 when the Barber Commission met. And at that time, again, we were 60% funded, had the advisory committee from the Barber Group, went through all of that. Of course, nothing changed with that. We eventually came out with a Tier 4, which did extend the time of work that was necessary, extended
to 30,
the age.
I believe, right? 30 years.
Right. Extended
same
that.
vesting period of 8.
Same vesting period of 8. I'm going to come back to that also, to the vesting period.
Okay.
But yes, basically all that just extended the time for work. And in the interim of all of that, while we're still talking about 60%, you still have bills dropped. Well, we need to lower law enforcement to 25. We need to lower fire protection. And I'm not disputing any of that any of that's a bad idea, but as far there's a funding mechanism associated with that.
Let me interrupt. For the audience's benefit, it simply means that you could retire at any age with 25 years or 30 years, which is in tiers 3 and 4, I believe. Is it 2, 3, and 4? I can't remember offhand.
Tier 4 is the 30-year.
Tier 4. Okay, 1, 2, and 3 were 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Tier 2 only made a change in benefits for disability.
Okay.
There was no change with Tier 2. Tier 3 is the 8-year vesting.
Okay, went from 4 to 8.
Went from 4 to 8 is Tier 3. Yep. No changes in benefits with the exception of the 8-year vesting. And then Tier 4.
Okay, Bill, you just said back even in the Barber days, 60% funding. I mean, that was a problem then.
Right.
So did the board make recommendations? Did it submit some proposals to the legislature then? Hey guys, we need more money here. We need to do something.
Well, you can see the rates have increased from that period of time.
Yeah.
And they have steadily gone up. The board adopted a funding policy during that time to try to stabilize a rate, at least for an extended. At that time, the way we used to fund the fund was an every year. Actuary came every year, and so we basically refinanced the debt to 30 years.
Okay.
Every year. And that had a great deal of volatility in the rates because it could go up. It really might need to go down one year and then go back up. And that's not really the way cities, counties, legislature needs to plan. So we tried to get to a stable, a long-range plan. Hey, let's set the funding rate here. That should take us for X period of time and give some stability to the fund.
Okay.
In 2017. There was a white paper done, and I think you've looked at that white paper.
I have.
that was given to every legislator in 17 that outlined the status of the plan, outlined what affected it, what changes could affect it, and gave really the whole shooting match of everything that could possibly happen or not happen with the plan and how it got there. And one of those, as you said, was 1999. Everything changed, and those that white paper speaks to it. The cost of those benefits was a 10% cost of payroll.
That's right.
And at that time, employer contribution was 9.75. This 2% increase, this July 1, just now gets us to that 10% cost of payroll.
Well, what was done in 1999 was honestly a financial shell game at the end of the day, with playing with an amortization period and so forth. So
I don't disagree with that, but it is one of the things that has brought us to this point. And as far as legislature being informed, my opinion is yes, they have been informed, because in addition to all these type things and the rate increasing, the rate not happening, the legislature, the speaker and the Senate, the lieutenant governor appoints legislative liaisons who are supposedly to be at our meeting. Most are, and Senator Blunt has been there every meeting since he's been appointed. Chairman Reed is very active being there.
So why aren't they standing up in the Senate and the House and say, "Hey guys, we got to do something here"? How come?
I can't answer that. And Senator Blunt will tell you that. I don't know about Chairman Reed. I haven't talked with him. Again, Chairman Reed's been great to us, as have Carl Oliver. They have both worked with all of us, and as has Senator Blunt. The budget folks from Senate and the House attend virtually every meeting. The peer is at every meeting and writes reports every meeting as to what is going on through their participants. So I would hesitate to say that nobody is. This is not something new, because as you said, we've been at 60%.
It may not be something new, but it's gotten more attention in the last couple of months than it has the prior 20 years, I feel like.
It certainly has. I will agree with that.
I just feel like somebody needs to be in the middle of the Capitol screaming, "We got a problem here. We got to do something." And that maybe that's what drove the House to say, "Hey, we're feeling like this is just being dumped on us. If you can hang around, we'll continue the discussion." We appreciate you guys being here. Thanks a lot. Coming right back, we got the PERS folks in the Element Wealth studio. So one of the key metrics, we're talking to Ray Higgins and Bill Benson of PERS. One of the key metrics, of course, is what's called the funding ratio. And as we established in the first segment, kind of the industry standard sets that at about 80%. We're, 56% now? Is that correct?
56.1%, right, as of the last actuarial valuation. Yes.
I think when I wrote the article, I'm looking at it, it was 48.6. So it's improved slightly.
Well, I think the 48 was a previous actuarial projection report.
Okay.
But the current, as he said, as of the last valuation, is around 56%. And we've been around that 60% funded ratio since around 2011.
And this is a continuous exercise, calculating these metrics, right? I mean, this is essentially the major inputs to managing the program.
Yes, we do. We do the actuarial reports each year, each fiscal year, and then we do an experience study every 2 years on a rolling 4-year basis.
Okay. So, Bill, I was just suggesting that it doesn't feel like that the legislature has just gotten the message here. You're saying, hey, they have liaisons that attend these meetings. They've been exposed to all the discussions. They know about all this. I just feel like somebody ought to be really raising their hands and shouting from the rooftop, and you could do that in the Capitol. You could get on the top floor there.
I could get with my Senator Bryan, and both up together we might be able to do that. I do think that there's a frustration. I think a lot of this is just driven by frustration.
Yeah.
Frustration from the calls they get from cities and counties, now calls you're getting from retirees and current participants, and frustration with knowing that everybody would like to have one simple, great answer to walk over here and say, Mr. Legislator or Ms. Legislator, this will fix it.
Yeah.
There's not one, and you've said that multiple times, and I think there's frustration there. I do want to go back also to one topic.
Yeah.
We took a lot of heat for talking about a 4-year vesting.
Okay.
And in Tier 5, as we talked about, which, as Mr. Higgins said,
that's been proposed, right?
Tier 5 has been proposed. The board passed the resolution asking for a Tier 5. What Tier 5 did was take away the big money maker of the projections, which was the guaranteed 3% COLA, and turned it into a COLA as determined by the board, CPI, based on whatever economic conditions were at the time.
More like Social Security.
At the time of the event, up to a maximum of 3%.
So not just continuously rolling compounding.
And again, that does nothing for current.
Said that
that's a drop in the bucket.
Right.
down the road when you start doing calculations and you're not accruing that 3%, it does make a difference. As Tier 4 now has begun to start making a difference.
Okay.
It's taken from about 2012 now, and it's done until 10 years for that to really start having an effect. Tier 5 will be down the road, but it is a step toward that. And again, the Tier 5's cost is 9%, or a little under 9%.
Okay.
And again, with 2% of that being the employer.
Yeah.
So again, the reason we did not attempt to propose a DC plan is because a DC cost more.
No, I got you.
And so that's the reason there are no recommendations for a DC. Since their benefit
Defined contribution.
Since their benefit was going to be so much less guaranteed, then the discussion was they should have a 4-year vesting, which was built into the calculation of their cost. And then the discussion came from some legislators and some employers.
Yeah.
That, hey, we need to 4-year vesting would be a lot better for us because it's a recruitment tool. We can use it better as a recruitment tool. Our response has been, don't disagree with that. However, we do need to inform the legislature when we propose this, what's the cost?
Yeah.
So we did, which is about $40 million. So then the comeback then is, well, this board is clueless. They're asking for a 4-year vesting. They're asking for $40 more million when we've got this $25 billion issue over here. That was made as an legislature, if you deem that this is what your department heads are saying, that this is a valid point, then we do it, and here's the cost. It was not viewed as, hey, we want you to do this. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. This was in a result of a request and as a part of the transparency of telling them this is what the cost of doing this if you're interested in doing it.
So with respect to the core issue here, which is the restructuring of the board, of the 10 members presently on the board, 8 of them are elected by the members of the system. It just feels like, though, that maybe those outside of the system that also contribute and fund the program should perhaps be represented on the board. Seems like that would be reasonable. But the board doesn't seem to support that, nor does the membership, obviously. But again, I say, Bill, if you're required to, which is a reasonable requirement that you put on your hat when you become a board member, and you essentially swear to uphold your fiduciary responsibility. Couldn't we find some people that could do that could also provide good governance and maybe a different perspective, which is what the board ought to be doing, not telling the investment managers where to allocate assets.
I don't disagree with that that there are not capable people there to doing it, but the way that this has been handled appears to be a politicization of the board and a takeover of the board. And again, I'm saying this for Bill Benson. This is not for I'm not making this as board member. I don't want to speak for any other board member about this. If you don't think I'm doing my job and I'm incompetent for doing my job, then I have, get rid of me. But do it based on what the facts of the plan are and not based on the misrepresentations that have been out there. I spend a lot more time on this plan a lot of times than I do on my job that I'm in Lee County. So it's not that you're taking something away from me
I understand.
But don't mischaracterize what I have done in order to do that.
Think about who elects you, though, Bill, in fairness. These are people who I would say, as long as their benefits are there, then you're doing a good job, no matter what the cost. Mm-hmm. And the taxpayers are saying, I feel this way. Mm-hmm. I feel we're obligated to meet the terms of those agreements. It said, you enter the system, you come work for the public sector, we're going to give you this retirement plan, and we're going to fulfill that responsibility. On the other hand, it is being funded by 2/3 of account for from the taxpayers, and maybe they ought to have a little say. That's all.
Let me just mention this real quick as far as just some historical information. Over the last 30 years, the revenue to the system, less than 1/3 has actually come from the taxpayer contribution. Now, we're certainly very appreciative of that and very respectful
of
that.
From a contribution perspective, it's 2/3 of the total contribution.
Well, actually, the employer, over the last 30 years, the revenue for the system, less than 1/3 came from the employer contribution. The largest percentage of income over the last 30 years comes from investment earnings.
Income. I'm not talking about revenue. I'm talking about the contributions. It's currently 18.4 or 17.4% coming from the employer side and 9% 100% from the employee side.
No, that is correct. The largest part there is from the employer side, and that's in many ways the nature of a state-sponsored defined benefit
I get
plan.
it. I'm not arguing that. But in the proposal that you guys have made is we need to increase the employer contribution rate up to 27.4%.
That is true, and that's the only lever he has.
Let's back up off that. Yeah. The proposal is to 22.4. The 27 is recommended by the actuary.
Okay.
At this point, the only thing the board has voted on is a 3-year phase into the 5, and then we'll see. We don't know what investment returns will be. We don't know the economic situation. But
the board's also requested an infusion of cash, from the general fund.
That's correct.
In addition to increasing, and both of those, of course, would be covered by the taxpayers.
That's correct. And again, it is strictly in the legislature's purview to do whatever they want to do with that. However, as far as making that group a majority, in the case you're talking about, you're talking really 8 appointments. Because the Commissioner of Revenue is 8.
Yeah.
And again, he is on the board right now. He's a great board member, very knowledgeable.
Fair enough.
But we're talking
8 of the 10.
8
of the 11.
8 of the 11, and then the treasurer's 9, and then you have 2. We have gone a long way from where we are right now to do something like that. If I do know back in the past, when the board was first created, there was. I think they may have just been involved with the investment side of it there, but there were.
But if the benefits, which is the main concern of the members, could only be adjusted by the legislature, then why is there so much concern about restructuring the board? They really would not be enabled. They would be empowered to just come in and make these sort of broad changes or even small adjustments to the benefits.
Well, again, the benefits are the question there. The board doesn't have that authority. Is a board appointed by the governor and the lieutenant governor. And again, I respect Lieutenant Governor Hoseman and Governor Reeves.
Sure.
Both. I've supported both of them, have voted for both of them.
But they wouldn't have the power to change the benefit.
But they have the appointies who can make the recommendations, and that's the fear of the participants.
But you got to get it through 170 people over there.
It's what happens. No doubt.
I understand. Appreciate you guys coming on. Thanks a lot. Ray Higgins, Executive Director of PERS, and also Bill Benson, PERS board member. Coming right back, folks. We got Christopher